Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Go.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to present my research here. As a language educator myself, this is a big opportunity for me. The title is, as you can see, Classification of L2 Thesis Statement Writing Performance Using Syntactic Complexity Indices. And
Just a second. Could you enlarge the presentation?
Oh, of course.
And also, if you can, please just talk about 15 minutes so we can have some questions.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so let's begin. Well, I specialize in L2 academic writing, that is undergraduate L2 academic writing, and it's mainly in the form of essays. And in general, it's a difficult skill to teach, learn, and assess because it requires certain motor skills, cognitive skills, and time, both on behalf of teachers and learners. And I've been trying to solve the issue of time for a while, at least in my own courses or in my own context. So to that end, we have automated essay scoring and automated feedback systems, which are widely available, at least to the universities nowadays. But then the models that are trained for automated scoring of essays or feedback systems need to be trained for separate courses and separate genres, so they do not meet the needs of every single course. And this necessitates performance classification studies, which are specific for different contexts or different genres to enable a wider usage of this. And in this study, I chose the thesis statement as a unit of prediction because the thesis statement in L2 writing context is mostly explicit, which makes it easier to analyze. And then it is the most critical part of an undergraduate essays because it carries the entirety of the main idea. And in a previous study of mine, I analyzed the rhetorical moves in essays, undergraduate essays, as usual, and then I identified the thesis statement as the strongest predictor of overall essay quality. The prediction interval equation can be seen below. This is from my previous study. So this thesis statement score was the strongest predictor of overall quality. And syntactic complexity, I thought, could predict thesis statement performance. In general, it's defined as a measure of interconnected structures within a given text. And well, syntactic complexity is treated as a latent variable, so the units of analysis can be seen in table 1. Well, the definitions are quite long, but in general, I can say that sentences, clauses, dependent clauses, coordinate phrases, T units that are terminable units, and complex nominals are the units of analysis. So just like the thesis statement, syntactic complexity as a whole is a strong predictor of writing performance. And given that information, I wanted to find out if syntactic complexity measures could classify thesis statement writing performance because of the fact that it is the most critical part of an essay. And if classification accuracy would increase by balancing the data set, I thought this wasn't necessary because in natural education data, there's always this problem of imbalance. So I wanted to see if I could increase accuracy by balancing the data set. And of course, this is the pedagogical end of the study. I wanted to see how the largest information providing variables interacted with L2 thesis statement writing performance. And for this reason, well, this is a classification study, so I used 10 machine learning algorithms for classification. And the context of the study was a course that I have been teaching for 7 or 8 years. It's a compulsory English literature course, which includes a heavy essay writing content for pre-service English teachers in Trakya University, Edirne. So from their essays, I manually extracted 206 thesis statements. And in a previous study, they were actually reliably scored with an instrument that we developed several years ago. All the essays in this all the thesis statements in this corpus were scored between 0 and 15, and the mean score was 10.97. And the whole corpus of thesis statements consisted of 3,946 words with a mean word count of 19.16 per thesis statement. And well, the data set was generated with a software which is called the L2 Syntactic Complexity Analyzer, which is commonly used in English as a foreign language studies for the analysis of syntactic complexity. Well, it relies on several natural language processing technologies, plus some machine learning classification and prediction technologies. Part of speech tagging, for instance, is heavily relied upon by the software. But the list is long, as you can see, but in general, the units of analysis are the ones that I have told you in the previous slide. And then their relative ratios among one another is measured by the software. And it gives you a sum of 21 different indices related to syntactic complexity. Then I had numbers as the essay score, so I wanted to classify them as low scores and high scores. For this reason, I applied a cluster analysis, which resulted in a good fit with two clusters. The first cluster was the low scoring or low performing thesis statements, which had a mean score of 6.74, and they were 69 in number. And then the second cluster was the high-performing thesis statements, which had an N of 137 and a mean score of 13.10. And for the analysis for the classification, I used Weka, developed by Waikato University in New Zealand, mainly for classification and prediction purposes. But then it has lots of add-ons and packages that can expand the use of the software. So I divided my data as training data and test data with a ratio of 80 to 20. The training data had 51 low-performing thesis statements and 114 high-performing thesis statements. And the test data consisted of 41 thesis statements, 18 of which were low-performing and 23 of which were high-performing. And the next step was to see the baseline accuracy of the prediction. So I used the algorithm for the computation of the baseline accuracy, and it resulted in an accuracy percentage of 56.10. So what I had to do was to improve this, basically. And then for the balancing of the data, I used synthetic minority oversampling technique, which, according to Akbani and others, is superior to random oversampling. So that's why I wanted to balance the data using this. And to understand how the variables contributed to the classification algorithms, to the classification operation, I used the InfoGain attribute eval algorithm. And then the largest information providing variables, I used them to run 4 man-Whitney U tests to reveal the interactions among them and the performance groups. And here you can see the results for the imbalanced data, the original data, if I may. So the baseline accuracy was 56.10, and I tested 10 algorithms. You can see in table 2 on the left side. The best performing algorithm there was locally weighted learning, which produced an accuracy percentage of 75.61. That was 20.01% below the baseline. So that was more or less an okay improvement. And in table 3, you can see the confusion matrix for the algorithm. You can see that there are some false positives and false negatives, actually. But then the general performance is 75.61%. And when you check the precision, accuracy, recall, and F-measure values of high-performing and low-performing thesis statements separately, you can see that the low-performing thesis statements were actually less accurately classified by the algorithm. The accuracy percentage for them was 66.67. And in table 4, you can see the variables that actually contributed the most to the classification operation. Of course, the list is longer. You can see the entire table in the full text, but these are the 5 top information providing variables to the algorithm. These were coordinate phrases per clauses, coordinate phrases, the number of coordinate phrases, then coordinate phrases per T units, verb phrases per T units, and complex T units. What's interesting here is that the top 3 variables that contributed the most to the algorithm were all related to coordination. And here you can see the results for the balanced data. As I have told you, I used synthetic minority oversampling to balance the data. There the results are also a little bit more balanced, but then the accuracy for the whole data set is still the same, but with a different algorithm, this time stochastic gradient descent algorithm. Just like in balanced data, the results with the balanced data was 20.01% above the baseline. And then in table 6, you can again see the confusion matrix, this time for stochastic gradient descent algorithm. As it is seen also in the precision recall F measure results, the results are a little bit more balanced, but then the total accuracy remains the same with balanced data. And with the balanced data, the largest information providing variables were more or less the same, with one difference actually. But then again, the top 3 variables which provided the largest information were again related to coordination, coordinate phrases per T unit, and coordinate phrases per clause. And then again, verb phrases per T unit was in the 5 most information providing variables. So actually there was not a big change in the imbalanced and balanced data. And the last part of my study was to see how these variables interacted with thesis statement performance. So I chose the 4 variables that were among the top 5 variables, both with the balanced and the imbalanced data set. That was coordinate phrases per T units, coordinate phrases per clauses, and verb phrases per T unit. Interestingly, all the coordination indices indicated that, the analysis indicated that high-performing thesis statements included a larger amount of, or a higher number of coordination. But then on the contrary, the high-performing thesis statements had a lower amount of verb phrases per T unit. So more coordination and fewer verb phrases were actually what marked a high-performing thesis statement. And as for the discussion, well, the results show that Biber et al.'s claim that syntactic complexity is a significant predictor of L2 writing quality is confirmed with these findings. And then I achieved 75.61% accuracy. That was 20.01% above baseline, both with imbalanced and balanced data sets, but still around 25% of accuracy was missing. And that could be because syntactic complexity is just one aspect of writing quality, and then we have lexical complexity as well. So combining maybe the both variables would result in a increased accuracy. And then in both data sets, coordination and the number of verb phrases provided the largest amount of information. As I have told you in the previous slide, a larger amount of coordination and a lower amount of verb phrases mark the higher performing thesis statements in the corpus. And then this could be because more coordination could be signaling more ideas and concepts intermingled or joined together in a thesis statement, which is the most critical part of the essay, as suggested in the literature as well. Then joining these ideas and concepts probably enriched the content of the thesis statement and resulted in a higher performance. And then the number of verb phrases decreased in the higher performing essays because this actually data set was created out of a literary analysis essays corpus. And in literary analysis essays, one problem is that narration is overly used by learners or undergraduate students, even though it may not be needed at all costs or all times. So this may be, the high number of verb phrases may be indicated a high amount of narration, which may be reducing the overall quality of the thesis statement. So the higher performing thesis statements had fewer verb phrases in them, according to the results. And this is my last slide, limitations and further study. So the corpus itself is a limitation of the study because it's a very specific corpus, including only literary analysis essays written in a single context by a certain amount of students. But then again, it may also work to the advantage if you're going to develop something specific to the context. But then the results, of course, are limited to this context and this context only. And further studies can be conducted to see if classification accuracy can be increased by combining syntactic and lexical complexity indices. Then if the information obtained can be used in an automated scoring or feedback system, or how much it can contribute to that system, can also be analyzed. And then the thesis statements in this study were extracted manually. So the automatic extraction opportunities can also be investigated. And this is the end of my presentation. Here you can see my references. Thank you for your participation. I'll be glad to answer any questions if there are.
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now, yes.
Yes. Are there any questions from the audience, first of all? Could you come here? Or yes, it would be best. And there is one question from the YouTube channel, and but I'll read it after that.
Yeah, I can see it right now. Yeah.
Okay, you can think about it.
All right, thank you.
Hi. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay, just I have one short question. Do you consider also ellipses, like gapping and other types of ellipses, as part of this syntactic complexity task? Because usually it is connected to coordination phrases, right? So what is your attitude to this phenomenon of ellipses? Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you for your question. The thing is, ellipsis is considered to be a part of general text cohesion in general. So it is actually a part of both syntactic complexity and textual performance. But nowadays, as far as I'm aware, the literature has some conflicting findings regarding explicit uses of conjunctions, ellipses, these cohesion constructs, as I can put them. So I think they should be tested in different contexts because of the conflicting results, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and now I will read the other question for the audience to hear. Do you think that the results also depend on the proficiency of the language speakers and their writing in their native language?
Well, proficiency should be playing a role in all of the results, actually, including writing quality or thesis statement performance in general, because it's basically the frame of how much the learners can perform. And also the native language effect is usually generally, I mean, visibly present in L2 writing as well. So yes, I think these are the confounding factors, if I may.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? So if I understand correctly, shorter sentences with coordinate structure are better.
The results are indicative of that, yeah.
Okay, I suppose you see the other question, which I think you already covered.
Yeah, in the previous question.
Yes. Okay.